New poll out from The Economist and YouGov. 57% of Democratic voters want candidates more like Bernie Sanders. No shock here for all of you because you all are familiar with how overwhelmingly popular his policy positions are and how he's uncorrupted. Women overall preferred candidates like Bernie by a narrow margin of 1%. That's across all party affiliations. By the way, pause on that. What happened to the Bernie bro narrative? More women prefer candidates more like Bernie Sanders than not. Now, it's by 1%, so maybe within the margin of error, but it's at least 50-50. So it strikes me that there are plenty of women who really support Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders style candidates. Men, on the other hand, appear to want candidates less like Bernie Sanders by a margin of 8%. So much for Bernie bros. Some of this is explained by the fact that male U.S. voters tend to be more conservative. Among racial groups, white voters wanted candidates less like Bernie Sanders by a 15% margin. Again, interesting how this flies in the face of every myth that, like, it's only white male supporters for Bernie. Black voters preferred candidates like Bernie by the largest margin, 45-14. Hispanic voters were about even. Other groups strongly preferred candidates like Bernie, 42-26. Get this, among Clinton voters, support for candidates like Bernie ran 62-19, higher than for registered Democrats. Wow, 80% of Trump voters wanted candidates less like Bernie Sanders. Okay, pause again on that. That's a little misleading because, okay, 80% of Trump voters want candidates less like Bernie Sanders. What do you think that number is for any other Democrat? Way higher. So what that means is there are 20% of Trump voters who are like, yeah, candidates more like Bernie. That's a lot. 2 out of 10 Trump voters are like, I want candidates more like Bernie. No other Democrat is going to get that many Trump voters who are like, open to their kind of candidates. No other Democrat, not even close. My guess is you have 95% to 100% of Trump voters who are like, no, don't want candidates more like Hillary, don't want candidates more like Obama, don't want candidates. So that's a little bit of a misleading number there. About a third of people in every income bracket want candidates like Bernie. But opposition rises with income as expected. Liberal voters preferred candidates like Bernie 64-17. The results are flipped among conservatives, 70% of whom want candidates less like Bernie. Moderates are evenly divided. By the way, again, even with conservatives there, 70% of conservatives want candidates less like Bernie, which means 30% of conservatives want candidates more like Bernie, which is a high number. Those are the people who are axiomatically opposed to you. Like, no, by definition, I'm against you. I'm a conservative. You're a lefty, Bernie. But no, 30% of them are like, I'm conservative and I would like people more like Bernie. Wow, that's incredible. So, listen, here's the bottom line. The information in this poll, it's so much better for Bernie than any other politician, which is why, again, other polls have shown. They've done this poll in a million different ways. He's the most liked senator around the country. He's the most liked senator when you compare him to other senators in their respective states. So in other words, among the people in the state that senator represents, how many of those people like that senator? He wins that way. He wins with just most favored politician across the country. So no matter how you ask it, not only is he in first, he's in first by 1.5 miles. And now we have another example here of, and you could say, hey, in certain demographic groups, he didn't do all that great. But again, this is all relative because it's not, how is he in comparison to the ideal candidate who's loved by absolutely everybody in the country, which is impossible. It's how does he do compared to other politicians? And nobody has numbers that are this positive. 57% of Democratic voters want candidates more like Bernie Sanders. And then here's the thing. the Hillary Clinton point is one of the most important points, because run-of-the-mill Hillary voters, there's a huge misconception. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. There's a huge contingent of people online who are so pro-Hillary and they hate Bernie. But going back to an old poll, that's only 8% of Democrats who are like, I hate Bernie. Which means over 90% of Democrats are like, I love the guy. And now we know, among Clinton voters, support for candidates like Bernie ran 62-19. So Bernie Sanders gets the Hillary Clinton voters. Hillary Clinton does not get the Bernie Sanders voters. Now you can say, oh my God, that's because they're evil Bernie bros and they're closed-minded and all. No, it all comes down to policies. You can get Hillary Clinton voters to support further left policies for the most part, because those are the policies that used to define somebody on the left. But you cannot get Bernie Sanders voters to support Hillary Clinton's agenda, because Hillary Clinton's agenda is like center-right and corporatist. And she's a warmonger. So if Bernie Sanders does well with Hillary Clinton voters, Bernie Sanders does the best on the left. And Bernie also does the best among Trump voters and conservatives compared to every other Democrat. There is no question here. This is your next president of the United States. Bar any sort of disaster, him versus Trump, especially if the economy takes a downturn before then, he might do a Reagan-style victory where he wins like all but one state. Actually, that's not true. We're so partisan now that that's not the case. But he would win. He would win in a landslide for sure. For sure. So interesting poll. Can't say it's unexpected. I know you guys know how popular Bernie is, but it's always fun and interesting to see that reflected in the numbers.